Welcome to the Disruption Lab. This episode is being taped in front of a live studio audience. My name is Kevin McGinnis. I'm the host. I'm here with Dee Pack, the CEO of Cargo Largo. Dee, I want to jump straight in. So Cargo Largo has built an entire business around what I think most people would consider waste. Whether it's undelivered shipments, excess inventory, surplus goods. Some might see that as a logistical headache. But you've turned it into this thriving enterprise. What do people misunderstand most about the work that you do?
Well, a common misunderstanding, and one I had when I first got involved, is that this product that becomes shipments containing product that become undeliverable through the course of the supply chain, through the course of distribution, this misunderstanding that there's something wrong with it. It's damaged or otherwise impaired. And certainly there is a small percentage of it like that, but the overwhelming majority is fine.
So what is Cargo Largo? Describe the business to me.
Well, there's really two faces. And I'll start with the client-facing side because product is the lifeblood of the company, and we get product from our clients. So we look at our clients in two segments. One is the transportation segment, and so clients within that segment would be freight carriers.
Okay.
And the goods that we get from freight carriers are undeliverable shipments. The other segment and smaller segment of our business is what we refer to as supply chain. So that would be a manufacturer, a distributor, retailer, intermediary. And that product is excess inventory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What was the inspiration? So tell me how the business started.
Well, my dad was in the insurance salvage business. That's the business that I grew up knowing. And I described that business as being catastrophe and site-specific. So there's a hurricane on the Gulf Coast or fire in Los Angeles. And these things happen when they happen, and you have to mobilize and go and deal with the product. And so really for him it started off, he was just one of many who were bidding on the goods. That evolved into collaborating with insurance companies and helping establish value so the adjuster could adjust the value of the goods and settle a claim. And so in 1985, we started working with Yellow Freight. Mm-hmm. I started to say he approached. I don't know who approached who,
sure.
But that business, with freight carriers and supply chain companies, whether it's undeliverable goods or excess goods, are just an everyday part of the business. Some percentage, and it really, in large part, relates to how well those companies operate and how good their systems are, but everybody has it, including us.
Breakage is going to happen no matter what. I mean, there's going to be breakage in the terms of undeliverable packages or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to happen regardless.
Right.
Yeah. What have been some of the challenges in the early days of kind of growing the business and establishing the business?
Challenges in terms of, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. And what were some of the challenges that you faced in the early days of establishing kind of this new line of business for the company?
So either from internally or, well, one was getting known. I mean, I should say that I started running the company because I didn't work there full time, but I started running it. this business really intrigued me, undeliverable shipments, and I ended up buying that part of the business in the early 90s. Part of it, of course, was getting known. I saw an opportunity to create a standard. As I talked to prospective clients, virtually each one of them had had a bad experience with a third-party provider. And a lot of time that related to accountability or a lack of integrity. And so part of it was explaining how we do things and how their experience could be different, and everybody has a solution to all their problems. So as with any selling process, you have to be able to convince how you're going to improve what the current solution is. So that was a big part of it. Internally was developing systems to deal with this industry, because I couldn't go out and look at peer companies and say, the top 3 do it like this.
There's no comps.
It was a challenge, but it's also the type of thing that invigorates me. It excites me to create and to solve problems and build things.
I think that was the thing that struck me when I first met you. We were sitting next to each other at a luncheon, and I asked you what you did, and we started talking about it. And when you hear it, it's self-apparent that there's a problem. Of course there's undelivered packages. Of course this exists. But that you were able to innovate and turn it into this enterprise. And then when I had the opportunity to come visit your facility, to see the level of incremental innovation, I would call it, to continue to tweak that and grow that. Talk to me a little bit about what creates an undelivered package. So what are these conditions that you're solving for, and are there opportunities to remedy that before it turns into product for Cargo Largo?
Sure. The way I like to describe it, and the way I've come to understand it, is that if you think about the supply chain and distribution as a process, and that process starts with the manufacturer, how effectively they make the product, how effectively it is packaged to get to its destination, how effectively it is labeled to help ensure that it gets where it's supposed to. So that's one end of it. On the other end, it is you and me as a consignee, or perhaps a business as a consignee. And then in between is the freight carrier or carriers, the various consolidation points a package may go through to be delivered. It could have also gone to one distributor to another distributor to a retailer to us. And so we work mostly with 2 modes of transportation. One is less than trailer load, and the other is package. And what those 2 have in common is they are picking up multiple shipments from multiple owners, going through this series of consolidations and then distribution out to multiple consignees. And that adds up to a lot of handling, which means opportunity for something to go wrong. My initial perception is that, well, the carrier has it, they must have done the thing that caused it to be undeliverable. But really, anybody in that chain can do something to cause the shipment to be undeliverable.
So now, not all of these things look the same when they come into you in terms of, you've created different lines?
Well, let me finish.
Oh, yeah.
There is another part that is there something that can be done short of? So, I mean, this was really I think the piece, I was thinking about it earlier today, that I found and find so intriguing is each one of these undeliverable shipments tells a story. Some of the stories aren't very interesting, quite frankly. Some of them are really interesting. I mean, to see something of extraordinary value or something that you can tell because of how it was, the degree of care in the manufacturing is a special piece. So we got in the habit of raising our hand to our clients when we saw something that we thought was extraordinary. You know, this.
Give me an example. Yeah, what's an example of that you would consider?
An armature, a piece of equipment that may look like scrap to most people, but in the right place in the assembly line is, won't say invaluable, but extremely valuable. So, we can sell that for you, client. Maybe it's worth scrap in this case, maybe it's worth something more, but if you can get it back to your customer, it's invaluable. So that just was how I'm wired to look at things like that, and that became a differentiator because we would do that, and sometimes our client would say, yeah, that actually belongs over here, thank you, we'll pick it up and deliver it. And so the value that we provide in helping our client keep their promise to their customer is infinitely greater than selling, even if it had great resale value.
For sure.
In talking in generalities. So that led us in 1996, we actually started a business within a business helping identify who undelivered shipments belong to. This year, I just looked at the numbers this morning. We're on track to identify 150,000 shipments that came in as undeliverable, and to make our client aware of that so they can then deliver to their customers. So definitely the highest value piece of our business as far as the relationship we have with our client.
Yeah, you repair the process rather than
right.
Yeah. That's we were talking about the ways that you do that, the ways that you can find out where a package is supposed to go. And I think one of the things you said to me that again, it seems obvious when you say it, but like maybe the label fell off and you have to open it and find the manifest inside and then relabel it and get it where it needs to go. Things like that.
Our focus is on undelivered shipments and how to optimize the value, whether that's getting a shipment to the intended recipient, or if it's something that is regulated or contraband or otherwise shouldn't go to the public, screening for that, and of course selling. But if you think about the companies we serve, they're in forward distribution. Their whole enterprise, whether that's processes or equipment or information systems, everything is geared toward moving product forward. So in that small percent or fraction of a percent that is no longer moving forward, they're not really equipped to deal with it. They can't afford to take the time to deal with it when 99% of the stuff they're handling is moving like it's supposed to.
Yeah, they're built for that volume. They don't want to have to deal with exceptions.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
And a lot of times it's not their fault. They don't have liability. However you want to look at it. So that even puts the hand on the scale further. You know, they want to be able to turn to somebody that they can rely on to do the right thing with.
I gotta ask you. You've mentioned it a couple times already. You've talked about the way you look at things and the way you're wired. Where's that come from? Like this problem solving. Like what can you think about, like in your youth or education or early experiences? Where do you think that comes from?
Well, I've always been curious. And enjoy learning. And I think those two things go a long way in any business. And as I said a few minutes ago, just the story that these things tell, which is part of the learning process. So I don't know. I don't attribute it to any one thing, but.
Were you a tinkerer as a kid? Did you build things? Were you?
I wasn't a tinkerer, but definitely a reader. I used to,
okay.
when there was actually a hardbound encyclopedia, I used to read that just because I thought it was interesting.
I did too. That's fantastic. I was the one who would pick up an encyclopedia and start reading an encyclopedia.
I'm not the only nerd.
No. I'll join you in that club any day. So, Dee, when I say the word innovation, what's that mean to you?
Well, it means different things at different times. Innovation Lab, I certainly expected to talk about this. And the first time we met, you asked me about. Certainly part of what it means is developing something. I mean, to me, innovation means improving on an existing, whether it's a system or, and so the story I told you, I think the first time we met is that, so there's a store, is one of our sales channels, and the way it was set up is the price tag ended in 9. Okay, so we got our second client, price tag ended in 8. Well, it became obvious pretty quickly that unless we developed another way of tracking this stuff, that after 10 clients, we're done, right?
Yeah.
So I guess that sort of necessity is the mother of invention, and that led to developing our proprietary inventory control system. So, I think sometimes it's a system like that. I look at, coming out of the Great Recession, we had a challenge with mediocrity, and so we developed a number of things to facilitate accountability with our teams. And, today we call that our people leadership system. One of the places it started was articulating in writing clear expectations. So a little bit different than a job description. Mm-hmm. And of course, we thought this will allow the individual to understand expectations, accountability, and know what management expects, and vice versa. And so we started with the positions that we had most of. Say a cashier, for instance. In the thought, well, how difficult can this be to write down clear expectations. And it had to be a two-way street for management just to say, here it is,
Sure.
doesn't work. So we got the buy-in, we had participation, we identified people that we thought excelled at that, and it was not as easy as we expected, but eventually did that across the company. And so, I mean, that was a piece of innovation that has just been very valuable because it also contributes to the culture of the company, which is another form of innovation. And when I think of culture, I really tie that to company values, which are tied to my values. And, you know, that's business is difficult and has its ups and downs. And so I think one of the touchstones is culture. You know, it may be a bad economy or there may be a pandemic going on, but what are the things that anchor us? And I look at culture as one of those things.
At what point did you think of culture as an intentional act? Because culture happens whether you want it to or not when you're a business leader.
Right.
So at what point did you realize that was something that was needed?
Early on, which is different than when we got to the culture that, you know, I am proud of and that people talk about. It took a while, and you know, I don't have any formal management training, so a lot of this stuff I learned by trial and error, and you know, so it took a while to develop.
How would you describe your leadership style and decision making as at Cargo Largo and what you do?
Well, I lead by example. I think it's really important to be able to get shoulder to shoulder with people. Sometimes that's appropriate, sometimes it's not. I'd like to think that I'm open-minded and you know, I think it's really important to listen. The challenge that I have sometimes, and I don't know, well, it's not just me, but I know it just because of my position, there's an intimidation factor.
Sure.
And I try and talk about that, and you know, but sometimes it exists, and so it's something I have to be very intentional about addressing. I am happy to let people get credit. You know, I think that's I'll be the first one in line to take the blame for something that didn't go right. But it's really important that other people get credit.
When you guys just recently consolidated, I think it was 6 warehouses into your current facility and opened up the current facility that you have in Independence. It's over 500,000 square feet, right? I think something like that. What motivated that expansion? Where were you at in the business that precipitated that? And talk a little bit about what that project was, what it entailed.
That was deferred gratification. So where we opened up originally in '86 was an old Alice Chalmers parts distribution warehouse of about 50,000 square feet. We took half of it, and our original client took the other half. And then in let's say around 1990, we added 25,000 square feet to the building, and the client actually took less. So we were expanding, and then in 91 we moved part of the operation out. And I mean, you've seen the business, the parts relate to one another. We're process heavy, we're hands-on heavy. I mean, in order to do our job, we have to evaluate product. And so when part of that process moves to a different location, it takes extra effort to maintain the same sort of vigilance. And so once we moved that first division out of that building, I had this vision that at some point we would be able to get back under one roof. And so I started buying land around where we were at. And you know, at times through our history, that project got closer to fruition. At other times, it got sidelined. And as recently as probably 2016 or so, I just came to terms with it's not going to get done, and that's fine. We've figured out how to operate in multiple locations. And then the e-commerce really started happening on a widespread basis. And one of our clients was very heavily involved in that, so our business started growing rapidly. And that probably was the single largest factor in our growth, and our growth was what drove the ability and the resources to be able to put the deal together. And part of that growth is, for a long time we were in 2 facilities, and then it became 3 and 4 and actually up to 7 facilities.
Okay.
And it was obvious that we weren't operating at our most efficient in that many facilities. So all those things combined to really enable us and motivate us to get under one roof.
The number of shipments or the number of packages that you deal with, I think, on a daily basis is like 40,000 or something in that. I mean,
that would be not on a daily basis, on a weekly basis.
Okay.
That is on the higher side. But, day in, day out, week in, week out, close to 30,000 is probably a norm. And at times of the year it increases, and of course based on the economy. It used for most of our existence, the volume of goods that our clients were bringing us was a pretty good bellwether of the economy. Once COVID hit, that equation really sort of got turned on its head, and it's still an indicator, but I think, not just my perception, I talk to people in the industry, there's still some remnant of the whole COVID phenomenon, economic phenomenon that's playing through the economy.
I think it just changed people's behaviors, and they've just stayed with it. Right?
Yeah, it's definitely changed
Things
behavior.
like DoorDash and Instacart aren't going away. They were grown and born during the pandemic and during those days. With the volume that you deal with, talk about some of the process innovation or changes that you've seen. I mean, we talked a little bit about the commodities, the lanes that you've created in the business, and then some of the technology changes that you've seen happen as well with what you do.
So this inventory control system that we developed and patented we started using it in, I think, 94 or 5, and got it patented a couple years later. Barcode-based from a scanning standpoint, also alphanumeric. But, back then, barcodes are, I was going to say ubiquitous. Now there's QR codes and other codes. But back then, barcodes weren't even on 90% of the product. But we developed a way of tracking product activity through our facility or facilities, which is important. A lot of our clients are publicly traded companies. They have to be able to know where their stuff is and audit. And so when we developed this system, excuse me, it was really to solve, part of our operation is like warehousing, part of it is like light manufacturing, part of it is retail point of sale. And so in developing the system, we were able to address all those things. And so we found a technology partner and identified different types of databases and different layers of technology that would work for us. One of the things that I have always thought was one of the most difficult jobs within the company is establishing value of an item. Mm-hmm. Unlike a distributor or a retailer, when we receive these goods, one, we don't know what we're receiving. So those 30,000 or, name the number of shipments we receive.
Every day is Christmas.
Right. We have no idea what it is.
Yeah.
Maybe a fraction of a percent that we're actually out buying. But we don't know what it is, and there is not a price on it like there would be if I were a distributor or a selling price or a retailer. And even if there were, we have to account for any number of factors in the market. And so our job and our mission in the retail environment, aside from variety, which is pretty easy, we don't have much to do with that. It's what we're obligated to deal with. But value, our mission is to be the lowest everyday price for product. And so we have to be able to go out into the marketplace and quickly, we're pricing 80, 90, 100,000 items a week, quickly determine what prices are. So we've developed technology to go out and do that. And we, as I explained to you, because the product's so vast, we divide it into commodities and sub-commodities, and rather than have people focus on everything, have them focus on a smaller piece of that. And so our technology goes out and we direct it to look at market value on the things that we're investigating, and direct it very specifically, because we want to know in this marketplace today, when we're dealing with this product, what's it selling for? Because we want to be lower than that. So that's really important piece of technology that is core to our business.
Yeah, I was amazed when we talked about this when I was out there. I expected there to be this room full of pricing people that were constantly on, like dealing back and forth, but it's a technology platform that you guys.
It started like that.
Sure.
I mean, it was literally a group of pricers in a room with newspaper circulars and and magazines and catalogs, and thank goodness it's evolved over time.
That was an easy one to
I mean,
point
that's
at,
sort of like the price tag ending in 1 through 9 or 0 through 9. You know, it's unless you figure out a way to get past that, you're not going very far. And the consumer has so many tools at their disposal today.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, is common. You walk around the store, people are scanning items and looking at pricing and comparing to what they can find it for elsewhere. I think that, and my president gets mad when I use this word, this phrase, because it's a catch-all, but you know, artificial intelligence. There are parts of the business, I think, that can benefit from that. And there are parts of the business that, you know, it probably won't ever be appropriate. And I think, like everybody else will learn as we go. But, you know, we have to embrace technology and innovation and change, or just lose pace with the rest of the world. I mean, that's the reality of business, right?
Yeah, we always talk about innovate or die. I mean, as a business, you have to constantly be progressing, or you're going to fall behind. What do you see as the biggest headwind for the business right now? What keeps you up at night?
Well, people development is always one or two on the list, really. Our business, and I was speaking to Pat and somebody else before we got up here, and I may have mentioned this when we were walking through. People, employees, customers either appreciate and are engaged by the dynamic environment that is our business, or are just sort of overwhelmed by it. And it's really sort of one pole or the other. There's not a lot of middle ground. So one of the things that I'm really grateful for and have am proud about is a lot of our senior people have grown up in the business. And there are many positives about that. And one of them, one really important, is that we know that they're comfortable with the environment, they enjoy the business, they're good at the business. But it's hard to introduce external knowledge when that is the primary source of developing people. And it's certainly not the only source, but there's this constant search for how can we educate and develop and improve the workforce. So that's certainly one. This sounds crazy, and it doesn't keep me up at night, but it remains a concern, and there is no right-sized facility. Part of the value add that we provide, and it's why we have to choose our clients carefully, or choose each other carefully, is we take what they generate. And so if they're growing quickly, we have to be able to accommodate that, or we just, starting in November, onboarded a new client. And it's important when we do that to have some idea of what we're going to be dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we asked for some volume estimates, and they were wrong by maybe a factor of 3, but you have to figure out a way to make that work. So that's always a balance, and part of that equation is how can we do things more effectively so that we're not taking as much space, or if we are, we're not consuming it for as much time as we normally do. And so the whole idea of innovating business practices is ongoing. We're going through an exercise now with our executive team. Provider of choice. We want to be provider of choice for clients, for customers, for, internally, for our associates. What does that mean? What do we have to do that? So with our president and longtime consultant, who I view as a COO, and I were talking through it before we met with the executive team. And, is this something we want to undertake? It's going to be a lot of work.
Sure.
Well, we have to undertake. How can we not undertake it? So we had the first session, introduced it, rolled out some questions that we want answers to inform how we proceed. And we talked for about an hour and a half, and took people a while to get going, but once they got going, it was really a fruitful discussion. And I got off the phone feeling a little overwhelmed because it's going to be a tremendous amount of work, but really important work. But those are the types of things that both excite me and you're going to have to roll up your sleeves.
In our previous conversation, we were talking about this concept of, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? This feels like that a little bit, like the task of being, the preferred choice across these various elements it probably felt a little bit like that elephant.
Absolutely.
And so how do you start that? Is it a benchmarking exercise to understand where you're at? Is it more of an incremental improvement to get there? Like, how did you?
Yeah, we talked about that prior to meeting with the group, and it's business is not a democracy, and I don't use that phrase very often because it's really important to include people, but there's some things it's just the way it's going to be, and this is one of those things. So we want buy-in, we want engagement, not of whether we're going to do it or not, but where do we need to focus? Where do we start? And that's really what that first session was about, to begin the buy-in process. And it started happening. It's when you introduce the topic, people don't know what to say, don't know what to talk about. You start talking about certain aspects and what it means to me, and it gets the conversation going. So we have a week to fill out this questionnaire. When it was just the three of us, I said, should we tell people it's going to be anonymous? And Jim said, well, we can always do that, but let's start off and not offer that, and just see where it goes. So it is not going to be anonymous, and a really important part of this exercise is self-awareness, because we're asking people, did I share with you the finesse management concept? Okay. So every business grows in stages, or hopefully does, right? And this was early in our process, early in the company's history, and we went through this exciting growth stage, and I don't even remember what it was today. Maybe it was developing this information. So what happens there's an opportunity that presents itself. And it's not really something we've done before, and we're not really sure how to do it, but we know it'll be transformational. So we figure out a way to exceed our systems and boundaries and do things that we've never done before. I use the word capability, and my president didn't like that. And technically we didn't. Obviously we found a way to do it, so we didn't stretch beyond our capabilities, but you act in a way where you go beyond barriers, and it's what you find is once you achieve whatever that goal, if you keep acting in that way, it's not sustainable, because you've sort of set aside processes that you have, protocols and accountabilities in order to achieve this thing.
Yeah.
So
if you keep at it, it's anarchy.
Pardon me?
If you keep at it that way, it's anarchy at some point in time. Right. Yeah.
So I coined internally, I looked at that as finesse management. And very effective for a high growth stage, and then there's a point in time, and it's not always clear, but you know when you've passed it.
Yeah.
And it's no longer an effective way to run a business. And so the whole COVID thing, and being able to observe and react and respond and grow was really the latest exercise in finesse management. And it doesn't mean that everything's broken, but things like clear expectations and standard work and certain accountabilities that have to be flexible in this high growth stage need to be reined back in. And so, the types of things we're examining as a group are how far out on the limb did I get, and how much of my department's work is really within this better defined area, and how much have we allowed this less disciplined activity to be part of our routine. So it'll be a revealing exercise.
Oh, Dee, I've got so much to say about this. So first of all, if you're not already starting to write the book, you need to start to write the book. Two, I as time has progressed and as you've taken this management approach to how you grow and how you think about that, this finesse management piece, do you feel you've gotten better? I love when you said self-awareness. Do you feel like you've gotten better at identifying where that point is before you reach it, or identifying where you've passed that point sooner so you don't go too far? And I guess, have you gotten to the point where when you go past and you're like, hey, some of these things we should keep in place? Like some of these rules or policies should change.
Right, you learn.
Yeah.
You learn, hopefully you learn. Have we gotten better? I can't say with great confidence that we have. I mean, and I'll tell you why I answered that way. So we went through COVID, and in 2019, between 2019 and 2022, we doubled in size, including people. And so if you think about what happened in COVID, one of the things that was much, much tougher was engagement. Yet 50% of the people in our company were new.
Wow.
we grew in size, we grew in profitability, which also makes some of these things harder, either harder to see or perhaps more realistically, from a human nature standpoint, less necessary to look at, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, we're making,
We're winning. Well,
we're
who cares?
winning,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, who cares? Yeah.
That, and then the building. And the building took a great deal of time, particularly from my president and myself. And which, you know, we only have so much bandwidth. And so, no, I mean, I think it would have been great to, you know, as the economy started to turn after all the money was distributed and, you know, just things started to change after COVID, that would have been the time to get really proactive and say,
Yeah.
But it didn't happen like that.
Maybe the improvement, maybe the realization that you always have to be concerned about that is the improvement, right? Maybe it's not recognizing it before or soon after, but it's knowing we have to be paying attention.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, the first time that I observed finesse management, it didn't dawn on me that it's just a cycle. I just saw it as, originally as, well, you know, this just means we're maturing as...
Change management.
Yeah, and now we're going to have all these systems in place, and, you know, but that's I think if innovation is part of the culture, it has to happen again, because you encounter opportunities, and if you make the decision of, I'm going to pursue the opportunity, then you're going to be stretched in some way that you have not been stretched before.
I want to shift gears a little bit. In my experience, and I think in the lessons I learned from, you know, one of my former bosses, Dan Hesse at Sprint, you know, this idea that businesses are not separate from community, they're part of community, and they have an obligation to be good community members. How have you thought about that with Cargo Largo in terms of the impact on the local economy, the impact on the community around you, the things like that? How do you, as a leader, do you think about those things?
Well, community is important to us in tangible and intangible ways. I attribute part of our success to being in independence. Could we have done the same thing elsewhere in the metropolitan area? Maybe. But there's still a piece of independence that I think of it as the Wild West.
Sure.
And there's a piece of our business that is like that. I mean, it's just there's this dynamic, unpredictable nature of it. And so I don't want to go too deep in that connection, but it's been good for us. We have embraced community involvement from the beginning. The community has embraced us. I've served on and serve on various boards related to the community. I've been part of a Nolan Road improvement district of one flavor or another since the mid-'80s. So, and we have a great relationship with the community, and you know, one of the things that we started, it may be 14 years ago now, We've always been philanthropic. For a long time, it was very splintered. It always tended to be focused on something to do with children or education. And so somebody, I'll give credit to somebody else, it wasn't me, I probably got tired of all these different inquiries about participating in things, but we got the idea of focusing our efforts. And one of the ideas that was brought to us, and I literally almost fell off my chair at the time that I was given this statistic, but during the course of a school year in the independent school district, 600 children either were or would become homeless during the course of that year. I just found that shocking, quite frankly.
Yeah, for sure.
So we started a program called Cargo for Kids, where, based on input from the school who manages the distribution of the backpacks, we created grade-specific backpacks. So school supplies for students of the appropriate grade. And over time, that grew to include hygiene items for kids, particularly important for kids, getting into their teen years. And now that has grown to a need of about 1,000 students a year. So we have a great partnership with the independent school district, and it's really gratifying to meet students that have been a beneficiary and gone on and graduated high school, gone to college. One of the things we talked about, we haven't done it yet, is it would really be neat to set up some type of fund, college fund for kids,
Yeah.
And so, there's ways to grow it, whether we do that or expand to another school district. But I love the relationship we have with the community.
Dee, I felt this when I first met you, and I think the more I hear the story, having gone out to the facility and seen the work you guys do, I think we become enamored with thinking the most innovative companies are the ones that are, the engineering firms or the tech, the ones that are maybe where our minds would quickly go to things like invention or technology advancements, some of those things. I'm becoming more and more convinced you're one of the most, if not the most innovative company in the city. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, just to think of the sector that's been invented and created, and the idea that you didn't have any competitors to benchmark and comps to look at, and what you've created with that enterprise to now have this facility and this business that's growing. It's been impressive to learn more about and to witness from my seat. So thank you for sharing your story with us. Thank you for coming and sharing that. I appreciate it.
And I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep us informed on kind of what's next and where you guys are headed. We'd love to stay in touch.
Well, it's been really interesting getting to know you and learn about the organization and starting to talk to a few people around here. There's a lot to learn, but it's really important thing to have in the community to be able to, I feel fortunate in that I took over, changed a business that my dad started, but to be able to have an understanding of the resources that it takes to grow things and to provide them is a great service. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for being here. So please, just give him a hand. So thanks a lot.